saw, I probably shouldn't do this, but the first time that I ever saw a white substance was being in the vicinity of Keanu Reeves, but that is maybe a story for another day from when I was a teenager. And it wasn't even anything to do with like movies or anything like that. He knew my old boss, and I don't even know whether I could call him a boss because it was like a free internship thing. But again, that's a story for another day. So the whole thing he's doing with Keanu Reeves is with Cameron Diaz too. So I think there'll be a Matt Bomer as well, isn't it? There'll be attention on Cameron Diaz coming back, and obviously Keanu Reeves is a really nice guy and super popular too. And the next project that he's doing is kind of two coming out within the next project comes out in the summer of this year, and it's with Kristen Wiig, and it's called Cut Off. It's about two siblings from like a wealthy family that are cut off, and that again is coming out in the summer. So there's kind of two coming out pretty close together when he's not done anything for a very long time. As I said, he's not going to be doing media because he says that he's not doing that anymore. And the other story that happened right after Sarah Brady released her messages, and a lot of people too did criticize Sarah for sharing these messages that are obviously between her and someone she was in a relationship with, and I don't think anybody would like that. But I will also say that on the other side of that, especially because he's a celebrity, I mean, that's really the only reason that people saw the story and it turned up into a big thing. But if she didn't release the messages, she just said something like, oh, when I was in a relationship with Jonah Hill, I felt controlled, or I felt like he was controlling, or he gave me a list of these rules for dating him, then a lot of people would just probably say, oh, you're a liar and stuff like that. So it is a bit of a catch-22, but again, like, nobody wants their messages between their significant other and their shared, or I don't think anybody wants any private messages shared for that matter. Just two other things to mention very, very briefly, because I'd like to give you as much information as I can, is there was also accusations that came out after Sarah released these messages from a former child actress called Alexa Nicholas, who was on Zoe 101 with Britney Spears' sister Jamie Lynn Spears, and she also ended up in the Quiet on Set documentary because she was on a Nickelodeon show, and that was like the behind the scenes of Nickelodeon, and Drake Bell told his story about what happened to him that came out 2 years ago now. I think it was this time 2 years ago. I do have a video on that, which I'll link in the sources too. But Alexa Nicholas said that Jonah Hill, she was at a party with him at Justin Long's house when Jonah was 24-ish and she was 16, and her friend who was 16 was dating Justin Long's roommate, and the roommate was allegedly Jonathan Togo, who would have been around the same age as Justin Long and Jonah Hill, like mid-20s, and the friend of Alexa was allegedly around her age, 16, and Jonathan Togo is probably best well known for CSI Miami, and I believe in 2009 he did have arrests for felony domestic abuse. And Jonah Hill ended up telling her that she had asked him for cigarettes and said, oh, I have some in my car. They went out to the car, according to Alexa, and Jonah, who was 24, allegedly pushed Alexa, who was 16, against the wall and kissed her without her consent, and of course the underage and age difference. Jonah's lawyer and management did come out and deny this. They didn't comment on like the thing with Sarah. I didn't like leave that out or anything. They did just come out and deny this, so that's their side of things. There is a lot more context and lore to Alexa Nicholas, but I would be here for longer than this video to go into all of that. And I did see if there was someone who had kind of covered everything, because I know there's been stuff recently, but I need to really like look into it way more. But already the stuff I know, it would take me so long to go over it all. And obviously this video is about Jonah Hill. It's just something that we don't have 10 hours to go into all of that. But I did also want to mention the Punked episode that Jonah Hill was in with Justin Long, and I'm sure most people know Punked, where Ashton Kutcher pranked celebrities, Ashton Kutcher my enemy, and if I can have one brief intermission just to tell you something really funny that happened yesterday, and I was like, I wish there was a way that I could text my subscribers, because no one else will understand how funny this is except for my amazing editor, Evelyn Darr. But that new Ryan Murphy show that Ashton Kutcher is in, The Beauty, absolutely horrendous show. The writing in the last 4 episodes especially, so bad. And the finale is the worst finale that I've seen in several years. Ashton Kutcher is playing basically his fantasy. He's playing like this vile tech billionaire, and he's terrible in it. It is his worst performance. It has to be the worst performance of the year. I know we're only in March, but it truly is terrible, and there is a lot of terrible performances in this.
Beautiful people don't get the real parts.
And in this horrendous show, Ashton Kutcher's wife is played by Isabella Rossellini, and the whole context of the show is they take this shot and it shows them beautiful and young and healthy, and his wife, Ashton Kutcher's wife, takes the shot and turns into Nicola Beckham, and oh my god, she's also terrible at it.
It's like always your department.
18th century French antique.
And when I saw it, I just was like, oh my god, this is like, no one else will understand how funny this is. Just everyone that we cover on the channel. But sorry, I just had to mention that. I suppose my Instagram stories is probably the closest to me texting people, because I post stuff on there all the time that just I think would only be funny to people who watch the channel and stuff. So follow me on Instagram if you want to see lots of stuff of G and like my other random things that I think about the channel sometimes. But back to Punk. I'm sorry for people who aren't regular listeners that you had to have that ADHD side tangent. But the Punked episode, Jonah Hill is like the one that's like in on it with Ashton Kutcher, and the whole prank is Jonah has brought Justin and his brother to meet these 2 girls, and Jonah knows the 2 girls, Justin Long and his brother don't. The girls are 17 and 18, and the 18-year-old is actually played by an unknown then, Ashley Greene, Alice from Twilight. They order drinks, they're confronted by the manager as the waitress has just taken their word for them being 21.
You guys are all of age, right?
Of age, yes.
Yeah.
Consensual.
I did see in the Daily Mail when they talked about this episode years and years ago that they put a line saying that Justin Long didn't have any reason to think that the girls were under 21, but to me it does seem like he knew that at least they weren't 21, because immediately when they're questioned about, even just asked for the ID, he starts to look panicked, and then behind his hand he starts mouthing to the girls, pretend you're 21.
Guys, can I actually see some ID real quickly? I'm not sure.
Justin Long then says, well, hypothetically, what if they weren't 21? And then when the manager presses the girls to reveal their age, and they say 17 and 18, Justin Long straight away says, oh, well, that's close. There's no reaction from this 27-year-old that their 27-year-old friend has brought them to meet 17 and 18-year-olds.
How old are you? Okay, so that's close. Okay.
I'm 17.
Of course, Jonah Hill is the one in on this prank, but there being no reaction from Justin Long, it makes it look like this isn't an unusual situation for them. It's only the manager questioning them that they are concerned about. And at one point later, the girl's dad even comes in, and the dad is saying, oh, you're letting them underage drink, but at no point does he say, I didn't know that they were 17. He just says, oh, I only met her tonight. One final thing I want to add is there is a mass amount of comments online about Jonah Hill and his behavior, especially with women, and Justin Long is actually included in a lot of them. Regular viewers will know I don't usually like to include lots of anonymous ongoing comments, but I will mention them when there are overwhelming amounts. I'll link one thread in particular where someone has combined about 20 various stories over the years about Jonah Hill. Of course, they can be completely fabricated, exaggerated, missing context, but there are just so many that I've seen in the past 8-9 days researching researching this video, and they very much match up with a lot of the stories I've heard over the years about Jonah Hill. Hill has worked with some individuals who also have very bad reputations behind the scenes like Brad Pitt, and it seems like when you ask anyone who's worked on his sets that it is always Hill that is the absolute worst to work with for how badly he treats crew and anyone who isn't a celebrity director or higher up. And of course, just like when Ellen got backlash from her crew and regular everyday people, Jonah Hill did have celebrities defending him. But of course, it just always looks ridiculous when a celebrity defends another celebrity.
Who the fuck are these guys? Oh, come on, motherfucker! He had 27 health! There's 3 of them. I couldn't have done it. If you hadn't fucking pushed them, we would have been fine. You don't need to fucking push them. Press W, idiot. You and your whole generation press W, fucking all gas, no brakes morons.
Celebrity for their treatment of crew and like everyday people, because celebrities aren't going to treat other celebrities the same way that they do treat, say, a PA on set. Regardless, I did think it just was worth mentioning that there are a massive amount of comments online that are from people who purport they either worked with Jonah Hill in some capacity, were hit on by him, or just encountered him in places like their jobs, because there were so many of these comments very much in line with the reputation he has in the industry of being a nightmare to deal with and extremely, extremely rude. I did this video after the former Prince Andrew video, or the second former Prince Andrew video that we've done, because some of my regular viewers might have noticed that when I do like a really heavy like former Prince Andrew Epstein video, that, I mean, this definitely isn't like a lighter video, but maybe a less heavy video. And one final little tiny story, just because it happened to come up. I actually have a viewer who originally reached out after I did a video on a show that she worked on, and she reached out to say, oh yeah, a lot of that stuff you said is true, and oh, here's some other details. And we've become friends ever since that. And she and I were just texting the other day, and normally when we're texting, I'll say, oh, I'm working on this video. And I said about Jonah Hill, and she said, oh, I had a friend who worked on Moneyball. And these are people that have worked in the industry for decades and have been around all types of celebrities. And she just said that Jonah Hill was just awful, awful, complete douche. And she said that he was so bad that he made Brad Pitt more of a douche, and that's another person that I absolutely want to cover, because he has to have some of the best PR in Hollywood. That all the stuff that happened with him and Angelina Jolie and like the incident on the plane, I have talked about that a little bit on my Patreon, but I definitely want to do a video on the channel. But my point being, while Jonah Hill has allegedly a terrible reputation behind the scenes, treats people horribly, and these text messages, but we're not talking about the Epstein list or James Franco. From the 1990s to the late 2010s, James Franco was an A-list Hollywood star and a celebrity that was loved by the general public. But behind the scenes, Franco had a much darker reputation. Through the 2000s and 2010s, it was truly unbelievable how many projects Franco was a part of. But unfortunately, it wasn't just acting happening on the sets of Franco's productions. From his earliest work in Hollywood on the set of the cult hit Freaks and Geeks, accusations swirled about James Franco, with Franco even at one point exploding on the Freaks and Geeks set and physically lashing out at his co-star Busy Phillips. As James Franco's celebrity star rose over the years, his behavior and the stories from the sets became even darker. And for years, when women would come forward about Franco's behavior and levy accusations against him, there'd be an enormous coordination to keep the allegations hidden and out of the media. But in 2018, at the absolute height of his career, everything changed, and Franco's horrendous behavior was finally exposed, brought down by his own enormous ego. So that's what we'll be discussing today. James Franco and the avalanche of allegations many women and teenage girls have made against him. We'll also be covering how the accusations affected Franco's friendship with his longtime collaborator Seth Rogen, as Franco's expulsion from Hollywood has resulted in Seth Rogen allegedly cutting Franco off personally and professionally. With some people praising Rogen for making and following through with a difficult decision, while others are criticizing Rogen for abandoning Franco and questioning just how much Rogen knew about his former friend. James Franco's career is very different from a typical Hollywood rise and fall. His career in general is very different to most other actors, and you'd be very hard-pressed to find a lot of other actors who've kind of mirrored this same career trajectory as Franco. Even just...
I remember they pissed off like the Iranian prince or something when they did a movie about being a dictator, and that thing got banned out of Hollywood and they lost like $100 million or something because they just wanted to be provocative.
Looking
they didn't
at
ask
his
first or think about it. They were just like,
a lot of the
piss this
projects
guy
he
off.
chose after he was firmly on the A-list. In September 1999, NBC premiered a show called Freaks and Geeks. Freaks and Geeks only ran for one season, and it wasn't even technically the entire season, as the show was cancelled and only ended up airing 15 out of the 18 episodes that they'd shot for the first season. While the show had very little success that first year, it has gone on to have a cult following, helped in large part by the number of its young cast that have gone on to very successful Hollywood careers. Linda Cardellini, Jason Segel, Busy Phillips, Seth Rogen, and James Franco. The show also was created by Paul Feig and executive produced by Judd Apatow. Both of them have also gone on to very successful careers, and Judd Apatow has worked with many of the Freaks and Geeks cast over the past 2 decades, especially Jason Segel, Seth Rogen, and James Franco. Judd Apatow's wife, Leslie Mann, that he married 2 years prior to starting Freaks and Geeks in 1997, also guest starred on the show, and there were additional massive numbers of Freaks and Geeks guest stars who also went on to have really big acting careers, like Lizzie Kaplan, Rashida Jones, Ben Stiller, Shia LaBeouf, Ben Foster, Shaun Wise, and many more. While many of the Freaks and Geeks cast did collaborate on multiple projects in later years, no one shared more success together than James Franco and Seth Rogen, especially in the decade that followed Freaks and Geeks. Seth Rogen would also go on to establish himself as part of another duo with the writer Evan Goldberg, and they actually wrote the massive movie that launched both of their writing careers into the mainstream. That was the film Superbad, and that movie also set up a lot of the cast as well that had previously been completely unknown or had smaller roles, people like Jonah Hill, Emma Stone, Michael Cera, and James's brother Dave Franco. Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg have collaborated much more and for a longer period of time than Franco and Rogen, but because Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg had always just wrote together, and Evan Goldberg isn't someone who's in front of the camera, when the general public think of Seth Rogen and somebody he's paired up with, they think of James Franco, even though they haven't done projects together in a number of years, but because they did so many successful multiple projects together that started all the way back in 1999 with Freaks and Geeks. Rogen and Franco became much more mainstream because, as I said, Freaks and Geeks wasn't really that popular at the time, but they had a massive movie in 2008 called Pineapple Express, and this was the year after Superbad, and James Franco had done all of the Spider-Man movies by this stage, so Pineapple Express really launched them as a duo and helped both of their careers massively, and from this point on, if they weren't on the A-list, they were after this year. In the almost decade between Freaks and Geeks and Pineapple Express, Franco and Rogen did remain close, and although prior to Pineapple Express they'd never done one of each other's movies, they did do promotional things together and occasionally popped up in projects that one of their friends did, like Judd Apatow. In June 2007, a year before Pineapple Express and just 2 months before Superbad would come out, Judd Apatow wrote, produced, and directed the movie Knocked Up that starred Seth Rogen and Katherine Heigl, who was at the height of her Grey's Anatomy fame. I was 19-ish when this movie came out, and it was so huge. It's actually still the movie I think of when I think of Seth Rogen. James Franco actually had a small role in this movie too, and he plays an exaggerated version of himself. James Franco played many exaggerated versions of himself in TV shows and movies throughout his entire career, and looking back on many of these little guest spots and cameos, some of the dialogue and these caricatures of himself are very telling given the many allegations that have surfaced about him. So just put a pin in that for a few minutes, but even though they weren't really working together over this decade, it didn't mean that they both weren't busy during this time period, especially Franco. But it was pretty touch and go after Freaks and Geeks whether James Franco would go on to have much of a career, because during Freaks and Geeks, his behavior on set got him in a lot of trouble, and people really did not enjoy working with him. He was pretty universally disliked on the set of Freaks and Geeks, and that wasn't just by the crew, which is sometimes the case. This was also by a lot of the cast outside of his friendship with Jason Segel and Seth Rogen. Over the years, crew members have said that even back then, James Franco was extremely competitive with the other cast members on the show, and he positioned himself as the serious one. Instead of Freaks and Geeks, James Franco also insisted on being method, and he has continued to be a method actor throughout his career. And this is something that a lot of people do not appreciate. Even very accomplished actors have spoken about how many method actors use this to behave extremely poorly and treat others on set very rudely, and there were criticisms of James Franco even back then about just behaving however he wanted in obscene ways because he was claiming he was method. Over the last 2 decades that Franco has employed method acting, he has caused a number of incidents with other actors, and one of the stories that happened on the Freaks and Geeks set was with his co-star Busy Phillips. Franco discussed with Paul Feig and Judd Apatow how he developed a backstory for his character based on the fact he was from an abusive home, and this caused Franco to lash out frequently on his co-stars, especially his co-star Busy Phillips, who not only detailed some of the incidents in her memoir, but she's spoken many times in the media not only about these incidents, but about her blatant dislike for Franco. Busy wrote in her book, and has also said this publicly, that James Franco was a fucking bully. And Busy Phillips had quite a lot of scenes with him because she played the character called Kim, who was in an on-again, off-again relationship with James Franco's character Daniel. And one of the worst incidents that happened between them, she also details in her book, and she has also talked about this in several interviews. And this was when Franco physically and verbally lashed out at her on the set when they were having a scene together, and she was directed to basically just hit him in the chest. and this was something in the show that was supposed to happen. And when she did that, Franco went absolutely nuts and became furious. And Busy Phillips said that he grabbed her by both arms and screamed in her face, "Don't ever touch me again." She said he then threw her to the ground and she fell like flat on her back, knocking the wind out of her.
Well, at the time, but we've since made amends. James Franco and I really didn't get along. You're on Freaks and Geeks, we were 19, and we really, really disliked each other. It's well documented.
After the show's cancellation, Franco's career did almost stall because of his behavior behind the scenes, but we know that doesn't hold a lot of people back, to be honest. But a year after Freaks and Geeks ended, he ended up landing the lead role in James Dean. This was a role that became foundational to his public identity and how he started to push this monumental performance. Franco studied James Dean's mannerisms exceptionally. He adopted his posture and his New York accent off camera, refusing to break character at any time, even when he wasn't shooting, and he even used the accent and everything in interviews. Franco ended up winning a Golden Globe in 2001 for his performance as James Dean, but probably the most important thing about this role was how it gave him his brand that he still pushes to this very day, that he is not a common actor like the vast majority of Hollywood. He is an artist, and it is this artist brand and label that not only allowed him to get away with rude behavior, pushing boundaries, treating cast and crew with disrespect, but it laid the groundwork for James Franco thinking he could get away with anything and do whatever he wanted because he was an artist, because he was James Franco, and because he was allowed to for so long. After his award-winning performance as James Dean, he went into the complete opposite direction and was cast in a massive, big blockbuster movie, Spider-Man. Franco was cast as Harry Osborn, Peter Parker, Spider-Man's best friend, and Tobey Maguire ended up playing Peter Parker, Spider-Man. And we have a video about Tobey Maguire and his whole poker ring, and also playing the love interest of both characters at one point in Spider-Man was Kristen Dunst playing Mary Jane Watson. This was in 2002, long before Marvel was a big, massive, successful film studio. Actually, at this point, Marvel Comics was in a pretty dire strait, and it was so small, they shared a tiny office with a balloon company. They were so desperate, in fact, that they sold the rights to Spider-Man, one of, if not the most popular and successful character, and they sold the rights to Sony, who still hold them today, and they sold all of Spider-Man for $8 million. I mean, that is crazy to think about. Obviously, $8 million is an extremely insane amount of money, but for Spider-Man, I mean, imagine them selling someone like Iron Man now for something like $8 million, maybe $10 million with inflation. And that's actually why a lot of these B characters like Iron Man and even C characters like Guardians of the Galaxy were called up to the A-team for Marvel movies, because Marvel was in such a bad situation at this time that they did sell all of their successful, really popular characters like Spider-Man, like the Fantastic Four, and the X-Men. And this was why the Spider-Man movie was a gamble, but they definitely didn't think it was going to be as successful as it ended up being. Of course, it was still a comic book movie, it's still a big summer blockbuster, so it was very different to what Franco had done before. And Franco is in all three of the Spider-Man trilogy movies, and he, of course, turns into his enemy from his best friend throughout these three films. But the films were a massive, massive success. I mean, that's kind of an understatement. And with the insane money Franco earned from the trilogy, and is still earning today from the trilogy, he could do whatever he wanted for the rest of his life and be absolutely fine. Never mind all the other projects that he's done since that we will go into, because things certainly escalated behind the scenes as his project continued, and he did continue to make surprising choices throughout the rest of his career. So with all of the money and all of the success from the Spider-Man movies, Franco started doing a lot of projects that maybe weren't what people
That shit is bottom.
expected. As I said, he teamed up with Seth Rogen to do Pineapple Express in 2008, and this was very unlike James Dean, very unlike Spider-Man, and gave him kind of this third niche that was filmed with Rogen, because over at the box office when they did films together. The other two projects that are arguably the most significant that Rogen and Franco did together was This Is the End and The Interview, and for very different reasons. And some people might not think This Is the End is that significant, but I do think it is, more so the behind the scenes stuff. And I think that movie is when there started to be a lot more discussion, not in the mainstream media, but outside of it, about Franco's behavior, especially with people like Emma Watson, who of course played Hermione in Harry Potter. And it's always been alleged that Franco and others' behavior on that set, which she and Franco have kind of talked around a little bit, was what prompted Emma Watson to take a big step back from Hollywood, and we will go into that in just a second. And The Interview is the other movie for very different reasons.
The Interview.
It's significant, but it blew up into a huge thing because it almost started a war. Maybe that's hyperbolic, but it was to do with the North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un, and they, let's just say, were not happy with how Rogen and Franco had a film about trying to assassinate him. And so North Korea were very angry about this movie coming out. And of course, like anybody would, they kind of capitalized on this. And that was a big push around the marketing for this film. And that angered them even more. And so that is actually the reason that Sony ended up being hacked, because they were the ones behind the film. And there was a lot of shit that came out from the Sony hack because it just exposed a lot of emails. There are multiple videos that I've mentioned the Sony hack before, because there were a lot of people burned throughout it, because just so many people talking about one another came out through these emails. Maybe that would actually be a good idea for a video, like all of the ramifications of the Sony hack. But that movie and This Is the End, Pineapple Express, and the other things that they've done over the years, people had this idea of them being not only collaborators, but best friends. And that was something that they very much leaned into. And who knows how true it was, because there are so many Hollywood friendships and things like that that are 80%. There's even some that are absolutely all bullshit and just PR, because it's like a lot of the relationships for CWWB shows or movies where co-stars are dating each other. It is really good for marketing, it is really good for PR, but Franco and Rogen, it seems like they were legitimate friends because it was for so long, but of course we don't know to what extent. Outside of his roles with Seth Rogen and the Spider-Man trilogies, Franco did very much lean into kind of two avenues with his projects. One was this more artistic awards bait avenue, and the other was more obscure projects and roles, a lot of which would prompt people to go, was that James Franco? And he'd do not only guest appearances on TV or random little cameos in films, he also did several uncredited appearances as well. One of the more artistic awards bait movies that he did was the film Milk with Sean Penn. He played the love interest of Sean Penn, who played Harvey Milk, and Sean Penn ended up winning an Oscar for that performance. Franco himself did get a lot of
Milk.
awards buzz, especially in the 2010s and that kind of period onwards. He ended up getting an Oscar nomination for the film 127 Hours, that's based on a true story about a hiker who becomes trapped, and his arm is kind of trapped between two boulders, and he ends up having to detach his arm from his body himself with a tiny, tiny, dull little Swiss Army knife. And it's, again, based on a true story. And for the vast, vast majority of this film, it's just Franco on the screen. And this movie, when it came out, was a very, very heavy Oscar contender, and Franco was one of the favorites for the Oscars that year. He did end up losing, but he did continue to make a lot of movies that got awards buzz, and it actually was one of these movies that he made, and the buzz around it, and an actual award that he won, that really was what prompted his downfall. But before we talk about the downfall, there's another little sector of his life that we need to discuss, and that was his continuing performance as a college student. James Franco, for years and years and years, went to various colleges like NYU and UCLA, and he would go as a student in the beginning, then he was a faculty member, and he would constantly speak about this in the media, talking about how he'd go to class like any other student, and the media really, really ate this up. They seemed in awe that he was just hanging out with the commoners at college. James Franco and the mainstream media loved to put out this story for years, that Franco was this thoughtful artist, he was this lovable, sweet guy who was very talented and so humble and down to earth, and he loved his craft so much, he wanted to be a forever student. And that story was pushed for years. But in reality, it was very, very far from that. In 2012, Franco did a movie called Spring Breakers that at the time people thought was kind of an odd choice. This movie was with a lot of very, very young and successful Hollywood actresses like Selena Gomez. And this movie is really when I started to hear about him being an absolute creep. There definitely were stories long before this movie, but this is when, outside of the mainstream media, the kind of whispers about his behavior became a lot louder. And I remember having the thought when I heard about the set of this Spring Breakers, oh god, like, not another one, because the year before he had done the movie Rise of the Planet of the Apes, and I really loved the Planet of the Apes movies. And I even remember actually when he was cast in Planet of the Apes, there was a lot of people that were like, oh, is he the right choice for this? And there was a lot of, I don't want to say like hate towards it, but there was a lot of people that were discussing, should we really be doing Planet of the Apes again? Because of course those are based on like the famous 60s movies. And then in 2001, I think it was, there was the Mark Wahlberg and Helena Bonham Carter and loads of other people were in it. And let's just say that version did not go down well. And so people were really apprehensive about whether this would be a good project. And there was people like James Franco and John Lithgow attached to it. So a lot of people gave it a chance, and I think it is a really good movie. And I think honestly that trilogy of Planet of the Apes is so underrated. And so when Planet of the Apes was very successful and all of the other projects that he was doing, James Franco at this early 2010s really was an absolute Hollywood golden boy. Starting with Spring Breakers in 2012 and through the next 2 years to 2014 is when Franco started doing a lot of very surprising roles, and even more surprising for someone who had won a Golden Globe, was Oscar nominated, and who'd also been in a massive blockbuster franchise. One of the most bizarre roles was him doing a 54-episode stint on the soap opera General Hospital, playing a character called Franco, who also played a freak. He did a few highly publicized episodes of shows like The Mindy Project, and would also do uncredited appearances and small cameos on shows and movies like Veronica Mars, Alien Covenant, and often in these small guest appearances and one-offs and cameos, he would appear as himself, like he did on the show 30 Rock.
This is the non-disclosure agreement regarding anything you two may learn about each other during the course of the relationship.
Yeah, what exactly is Mr. Franco covering up here?
Oftentimes, roles like these, when looking back, some people might say these roles when he was playing like exaggerated versions of himself seemed to be hinting at some of the things that were going on behind the scenes. During this time, Franco appeared in so many projects, and during this time, the vast majority of the interviews and promos and all of the media that focused around the projects, they all seemed to love Franco and would go on about his studies and his teachings and what a creative he was. But the stories outside unlike the mainstream media, again, were very different. People who attended school with Franco reported that on the rare occasion he would come to class, he would usually just use the opportunity to pick up his younger classmates who were all 18, 19, 20, 21. And the other rare times that he was in class, he was usually asleep. There have also been several people who attended school with Franco that have spoken out over the past few years, and there were also rumors that when Franco was actively in all of these various classes, that he had paid other students and even teachers' assistants to do the courses for him. There also were extensive concessions made for Franco that started right at the beginning when he re-enrolled at UCLA in 2006 as an English major. Prior to Freaks and Geeks in 1999, Franco had attended UCLA for 1 year, but he did drop out to pursue acting. When Franco dropped out of UCLA, his wealthy family cut him off. Franco's father had become very frustrated by this decision, as he thought that James had finally got things together because he went very off track while he was in high school. Franco had gotten a lot of trouble while he was in high school and had even been arrested multiple times, which at one point led to him being a ward of the court. He was arrested for some very minor things like graffiti, but would eventually progress up to things like extensive theft. And at one point, he was stealing cologne all the time and then selling it to his classmates at school. When he dropped out of UCLA, his parents refused to support him any longer, and he started working at the McDonald's drive-thru at night. And he has talked about this extensively over the years and said he used to do things like try different accents when he was on the drive-thru. Over the years, in many interviews, Franco has tried to lean into this humble beginnings working at McDonald's, but he is from a very wealthy Silicon Valley family. You kind of see his younger brother, Dave Franco, trying to follow the same line. With Dave Franco, he's from a wealthy family, but he also denies that him being James Franco's brother gave him any sort of leg up in the industry at all. As I mentioned earlier, Dave Franco's first movie was Superbad with his brother's friend, and his brother even had a cameo in that movie. His next movie was Milk, which was his brother's movie, and outside of the 90s TV movie trilogy and a few really terrible TV shows, like his one season of Scrubs that was universally hated because it was that kind of spin-off reboot season of Scrubs, and also the ABC family show Greek, the vast majority of Dave Franco's projects, especially the first 10 years of his career, were in some way connected to his brother or one of his brother's friends and collaborators. And even though Seth Rogen and James Franco don't work together anymore, Seth Rogen does still cast Dave Franco in a lot of his projects. And it wasn't just that Franco was allegedly not going to class or sleeping in the few classes he went to or having allegedly other students do his work, but there was also massive concessions made by the universities for Franco. For example, he was allowed to take 62 course credits per quarter compared to the usual max of 19. And that's usually like the hours per week that you would go. So if you're doing, say, 12 course credits, you have class 12 hours because it's normally 3 times the amount that you're in class that you're supposed to be like studying and doing work. And most people, I mean, it really does range, but most people try and do between like 16 and 18, and that will usually spit you out at the end doing a 4-year degree and finishing somewhat on time. And people will take, you know, maybe 4 credits over the summer and things like that. But 62 is obscene for anyone, never mind someone who is having a completely massive Hollywood career, as this was the same time that he was filming the tail end of the Spider-Man trilogy. It was during Spider-Man 3 that he was also given a ton of credits towards his degree, so he ended up finishing his degree in 2 years, basically. And in June 2008, he graduated with a bachelor's degree in English. Of course, celebrities have more time than us normal people. They've kind of removed the mundanity of life and have people doing everything for them. But it seems the only way James Franco received these various bachelor's and later master's degrees was being given the vast majority of the credits. As I said earlier, Franco loved nothing more than to remind people that he was this forever student, and the media enjoyed him talking about this too. And it really seemed over the years that these colleges and universities were lining up to bestow degrees on Franco. It was clear by the late 2000s and the early 2010s that there were plenty of stories circulating about his behavior both on and off campus with young girls and young women in their late teens and early 20s. And there were also many people associated with these colleges and universities, both students and professors, who spoke out about Franco and attempted to go to the colleges and universities about him and his behavior. But exactly like what was happening with his behavior in Hollywood, the people who could actually do something, the people with the power, looked the other way and downright ignored what was going on with Franco. Before we discuss what actually was happening behind the scenes and on a lot of the sets, I briefly want to cover what Franco was able to do at these schools through the late 2000s and early 2010s, but I don't think there's really been that much coverage, and the legitimacy that these schools provided him with allowed him to prey on countless more victims and even create a system that enabled his horrendous behavior. The year after he graduated from UCLA, Franco was announced as the commencement speaker for UCLA's graduation ceremony that was supposed to happen on June 12, 2009. Months before the event, his selection drew a lot of criticism from students. They even ran an editorial in the campus newspaper questioning not only his qualifications, but him as a person and his behavior, and they even organized a Facebook page. This is 2009, so, Facebook had a lot more sway back then, and it was opposing him giving the commencement. On June 3rd, just over a week before the ceremony, Franco withdrew from the engagement, citing a scheduling conflict. Classic Hollywood. And he said that he was going into pre-production on something. In January 2011, Franco later addressed the controversy in a self-referential kind of way when he was collaborating with the Harvard Lampoon, and he made a satirical video through Funny or Die that really kind of mocked his last-minute cancellation. Whether Franco knew his number was up at UCLA or whether he just fancied a change, he ended up relocating to New York City after this whole controversy, and he started attending multiple schools there. Quickly, more students from these new schools started speaking out about similar things that had gone on at UCLA. Franco not coming to class, and on the odd occasions he did, making a lot of the female students uncomfortable. This is also when there started to be a lot of stories, again, outside the mainstream media, where other students were saying that Franco was turning up at a lot of their parties, unbeknownst to most of them, and even sometimes people were like, why is James Franco here? Franco enrolled in 3 master's programs, 3 prestigious master's programs at the same time. The first was Columbia University School of the Arts for writing, NYU, New York University's filmmaking masters at the Tisch School of the Arts, and then he also participated at Warren Wilson College in North Carolina, focusing on poetry. Franco completed his MFA at Columbia University in 2010.
Let me out!
He also enrolled at Yale University's PhD program in English. In addition to all of these programs, he attended courses at Rhode Island.
Let me out of the car! Let me out!
In
Let me out!
September 2010,
God damn it,
there was
let me
an
out.
interview with him in Showbiz 411,
Let me out. Let
where
me out.
Franco publicly stated that he had ended up receiving a D in an acting class at NYU's Graduate Film School. This interview and Franco's statements resulted in a big controversy because Franco, especially at that time, had a very loyal fan base.
And the professor ended up speaking out about Franco, and there even was a...
Let me out of the car, you piece of shit! Cocksucker! Brain dead developers! You fuck my run, you fucking cocksuckers! Fucking fuck you!
A course called Directing the Actor, which was even more embarrassing for Franco because he was becoming a director at this time. And the professor also ended up saying that Franco had not earned legitimately any of his grades, and all of the degrees that were being bestowed upon him were completely influenced by the fact he was an A-list celebrity, and it really was what a lot of people thought, and he wasn't really doing any of these degrees or the work for them. Franco was absolutely furious by this professor's statements and ended up doing...
Well, it ended on a toxic note. Sorry, guys. The fucking piece of shit cocksucker developer had to rob me. But I mean, that's who the piece of shit cocksucker brain dead developers are. That's who they are deep down inside. They're there to fuck you and take your fun away. That's who they actually are there. They're to take your money and fuck you and take your fucking your fun away. So on that wonderfully positive note, I'm gonna stop here. It's obvious that I'm not gonna win if the piece of shit developer isn't gonna let me leave the goddamn cars. So go fuck yourself, fucking piece of shit cocksucker, epic cocksucker. Fuck you, asshole. Fuck you. That was on you, motherfucker. I hammered my F key for so long. I hammered my E and F key for like 3 minutes and I couldn't leave that car. So at that point, I was just like, well, you threw my runaway. And has anybody ever in the history of Fortnite not ever been able to leave the car? No, but when I am in second place and fighting a 1v3, you'll make sure that I do, and I'm the only person in the fucking world who's never been able to leave that car. But I don't know what the fuck you did to me there, but that's you, piece of shit, cocksucker epic. That's you, motherfucker. I've been leaving cars all night. I won 5 times tonight or whatever it is, and I left the car each match, I guarantee it. But when you had me in a 1v3 in a second place, you goddamn sure made sure I couldn't leave that car. You fucking stupid piece of shit, low IQ cocksucker, junk thieves. Suck my fucking dick, epic. Suck my fucking dick. And on that note, I'm going to bed. If they didn't fuck me, I wouldn't yell at them. I wouldn't yell at them like this, but they're stupid piece of shit cocksuckers and they're killing their industry, and it's stuff like this. It's stuff like this I face all goddamn day. So anyways, I love you guys. Going to bed. I'll see you tomorrow. I'm going to title videos now and go to bed. It's obvious that I should go to bed. It's a Tuesday and it's 2:10 in the morning, and I love you guys. I will see you later. I have thousands of videos on my YouTube channel if you want to watch me call the epic cocksucker fucking failures, epic cocksucker failures to their fucking face. Come to my channel and check me out. And the anger is righteous and true and correct. The anger is correct, righteous, and true. It is exactly where it should be. I don't think anybody else in the world got fucked like that today, but I did. You saw me try and leave that fucking car. Why couldn't I leave that fucking car? It's because you suck dick, developer. I don't know why, but it's like you set the deck against me. Piece of shit cocksucker brain dead developer.